Hello, folks, and welcome back to Chris Wyatt. This is Chris in Central Pennsylvania with another report on Africa, this one focused on South Africa once again. A week ago, the current Minister of Tourism, Lindiwe Sisulu, penned an op-ed piece complaining about South Africa's system of law and jurisprudence. And as usual, typical leftist politician, rather than simply addressing the underlying conditions, the problems that are taking place in South Africa, which are entirely the fault of the failure of her party's government to implement the rule of law and adhere to the rule of law, and their selective choice of who it applies to is the problem. Now, here's her op-ed piece, which appeared in the Daily News and then also in the Independent Online. Hey, Mzansi, have we seen justice? In which she spews all kinds of utter nonsense. This is from Modiba, who complains that a cabal has been attacking Lindiwe Sisulu, an attack on all of us. Well, your propaganda is the problem. Let's talk about this. Now, specifically, I want to talk about here is some comments she made. I could talk endlessly and debunk virtually everything she says in here. She said some useful things, but most of it is race hustling. And let's just bring one thing to the fore right now and point out one of the obvious examples of this nonsense from Lindiwe Sisulu, who has been part of the problem for 28 years. She has served as a member of parliament since the 1990s and never left office and been a minister, a perpetual minister of this ministry, of that ministry, and she's accomplished virtually nothing in her entire nearly 3 decades, suckling on the teat of the taxpayer. This is what she says. The stark reality is that if you don't have land, you don't have a country. That is why an overwhelming majority of wars in history have been fought over land and territory. That's not the reason. That's a simplistic, juvenile, childish, 6-year-old explanation of why wars have occurred and is very uninformed. But it tells you about the dunderheads who are in the African National Congress. In South Africa, 8% of the population control 80% of the land and its resources. So who are the real owners of the country? Meanwhile, 80% of the majority in the country control less than 10% of the market capitalization at Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Who is fooling who? Well, you're not fooling anyone with your race hustling and your fraudulent propaganda and your bait and switch sort of distraction. Pay no attention to the looting taking place in your own party, which you have been complicit in by being part of this government for 3 decades. Now, I turn you to the Land Audit Report, November of 2017, version 2. Phase 2, private land ownership by race, gender, and nationality. Far from the lies that Lindiwe Sisulu perpetrates in her fraudulent opinion piece. And that's all it is, an opinion, a very dunderheaded, empty-headed, foolish opinion piece. Let me tell you the true story about land in South Africa. Proponents claim that black South Africans are poor because they own no land, like Lindiwe Sisulu. But this is dishonest. Most human beings around the planet don't own any land. I don't own land. Few South Africans of any race own farmland specifically. 181,532 South Africans, or 0.0034% of the population of South Africa, actually own land in 2017. 0.0034. So far from 8% of the population controlling 80% of the land, which is a totally fictitious piece of nonsense. And what is the 8%? Well, the 8% is South Africa's so-called white population. So she is race hustling, trying to hoodwink rubes and sheep into believing that South Africa's 4.8 million whites control 80% of the land. That's a lie. It's a flat-out fiction. 0.0034% of the population. So even if every single white, including a toddler in their creche, owned land in South Africa, how could 8% of the population own land when only 0.0034% of the population? Now, here's the reality of this, too. That's a total of 419,005 farms. One doesn't need to own land to avoid or escape poverty. The key is good governance and education. Now, the ANC has failed in education and must seriously address its failures in this area. Apartheid governance ensured that most whites got quality education while most blacks did not. But 28 years later, it appears that few white or black South Africans in public schools are getting a quality education. Additionally, there are painfully few stories of transfer of land from white to black owners. This is also an ANC failure. But take a look at these statistics. This is Table 5 from the 2017 report by the government of South Africa, not by some party that's trying to protect white farmers or whatever. These are the number of individual land owners in South Africa. Far from the 8%, as I said, the total percent of South Africans is just a fraction of 1/10 of 1%. But the total number of landholders, 181,532, of which just 53% total across the country, 95,673 white landowners. She wants to take 4.8 million and claim that they own the land when 95,673 people are actual landowners. 22% of the land is owned by black Africans in 2017. 40,494 landowners. Now, this isn't the actual acreage owned by people. It's the people. But her argument holds no weight whatsoever. 95,673 landowners out of 181,000. That's just 53%. Hardly 8% of the population. Now, to be fair, the African, which is black, it's not African. All these people are African. That's another thing that's going on here. They're not Africans. They're blacks. Whites, blacks, coloreds, Indians. Calling black Africans African is an intentional racist trope to deny people born of the soil of Africa their heritage as an African. Africa is populated by Arabs, by Ethiopians, by Asians, by those of European origin, so-called whites, by mixed race people, by people from the Indian Ocean region. It's not simply the purview of black Africans. And to simply call blacks African is a disingenuous racist trope which is used by ANC politicians. But let's go with that racist trope just because that's the vernacular they understand. The number of landowners who are black African is 22%, 12% for colored, 9% for Indian out of 181,000. Total lies, total lies. The secret to success is not owning land. It is education and good governance. Now, Modiba said, over the past week, South Africans on social media and other platforms witnessed an orchestrated, well-planned, systemic attack on Tourism Minister Lindiwe Sisulu. Really? Attacking a black woman for having an opinion proves every single point that Sisulu was trying to make in her thought leadership piece in the first place. Really? So we're going to pull this nonsense out, genderism, misogyny, racism, because you can't hold a cogent thought. So when someone criticizes propaganda and outright distortions and lies, because someone has female genitalia, they're allowed to say that and get away with it without anyone questioning it? No. People aren't attacking Lindiwe Sisulu because she's black or because she's a woman. People are attacking her comments because they're idiotic and they're full of nonsense and they're dishonest. Now, in the midst of this report, this op-ed piece she did, she actually said some factual things. But I'm not commenting on the factual things. I'm commenting on the racist, race-hustling propaganda that she has put out in the public space. Total lies. Her party, without any whatsoever opposition, has had the ability to run this country for 3 decades. And they've run it in the ground because they're a corrupt racketeering organization, and she is part of that corrupt racketeering organization for 3 decades. What has she done to improve the lives of South Africans in the dozens of ministerial posts that she's held since 1994? I'm embellishing by saying dozens. She's had plenty is the point. She's never done anything except been a minister for the last 30 years. And what has she accomplished? She claims to accomplish a lot in transformation. What transformation did she change? Stop it. This is nonsense. Total nonsense. If you're not a subscriber, become one. You'll hear more exposing the lies and fraud of people like Lindiwe Sisulu, who don't represent the people, but the cabal. Cheers, folks.